What's up, Dragon Brood? We are here on September 5th, according to the calendar on my computer, because I don't know what day anything is anymore during the pandemic, to talk about more Innistrad Midnight Hunt previews. We're making up for today and yesterday because there weren't that many, actually. I guess Wizards decided they weren't going to put a lot over the weekend, maybe low engagement, I don't know. But regardless, we have at least a few cool cards to talk about today in today's previews reviews. If we go quickly, we might actually be able to cover all the cards. So today we've got Faithful Mending. It's a blue-white instant. You gain 2 life, you draw 2 cards, and you discard 2 cards. Flashback of 1 colorless, a white and a blue. I don't know. This is sort of like Faithless Looting, but you get to gain some life, but it's in blue-red. That doesn't necessarily want that. I think it's actually fine, though. I don't think it's necessarily great, but I could see where this does show up in some various lists, because late in the game, if you've held on to a land or two you don't need, or maybe a counter that you ended up getting heavy on because I don't know, you've got 3 irrelevant counters in the matchup, that happens sometimes. Having something like this to just like cycle your hand, get a couple of life and some fresh cards might be okay. I don't think it's necessarily a 4 of in a lot of the decks I'm thinking of off the top of my head, but just a couple of copies is probably okay. Before I say anything else about this card, the art is freaking amazing. Croaking Counterpart. It's a colorless, green, blue, sorcery, rare. Create a token that's a copy of a target non-frog creature, except it's a 1/1 green frog. Flashback for 3, a green, and a blue. So you can basically copy any creature you want, but instead of being its normal size, it's going to be a 1/1 frog instead of what it normally is. So if you want a second Goldspan Dragon, you'll have a 1/1 flying Goldspan frog. I don't know. That's so weird. I don't know what this card's supposed to do. Create a copy that's a copy of a target non. Like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm sure there's something awesome. I mean, maybe there's a weird world where you're getting really funky and you're putting this with Scoot Swarms. Now you're getting like double the tokens faster. Like, I don't know. There's probably other things you can do with this that are more useful. How useful? I don't know. We've had a lot of copy cards over the last couple of years, and none of them have really made a big impact. Matter of fact, I think we had a couple also in Forgotten Realms that we haven't even experimented with here on the channel. So, I'm probably not going to be too high on this card. Okay, Unnatural Growth. A colorless, and green, 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 green. So that's 5 mana, 4 of which are green. Enchantment, at the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. This card's kind of cool. Actually, there where it says at the beginning of each combat, that's pretty neat because it's almost a way to have an anthem effect for your creatures to like pump them up, but not permanent. So the opponent does get a chance to deal with your creatures where they're like 2/2s as opposed to 4/4s. So that makes it kind of interesting strategically, but it actually triggers on each combat. So on your turn and your opponent's turn. And that's actually kind of cool. I think that's a bit different. I also like the fact that it kind of forces you heavily into green if you're going to use this. Now, I'm not saying this green needed this thing or whatever, but more that if you're going to have big effects, make it to where they're not just easily splashable without a lot of work. And this kind of falls into that spot. I also think this could be a really fun commander card. This is something I could see myself putting into a couple of my decks and really having some fun with this. Even turning all your tokens that a lot of times might be 1/1s or 2/2s, making them bigger actually also is another big bonus there. So really, really interesting card. I don't know if it's going to be standard impactful, but I might try 1 or 2 in the list. Sludge Monster, 3 colorless, blue, blue, 5/5, creature horror. Whenever Sludge Monster enters the battlefield or attacks, put a slime counter on up to 1 other target creature. Non-horror creatures with slime counters on them lose all abilities and have base power and toughness to 2. Okay, so that's kind of cool. So it comes into play and it shrinks something else because the thing gets covered in slime. But if the creatures are horror, you're good. So there's not a lot of horror cards that get played right now. So that's the first thing. So that's kind of interesting. 5 mana, 5/5 is fine, not great. But it does come with a pretty substantial ability by just turning off the abilities of the other creature as well. Them losing their abilities is actually pretty impactful. And the fact that you could do this every turn and shrink down your opponent's biggest creature, force your opponent to have to double or triple block potentially to kill it. And that's if you don't have a bounce spell or something else, you know, divide by 0 or whatnot to mess up their combat. This card actually could be playable. It reads really weird, so I'm not 100% sold, but I'm not going to be happy seeing one across the table from me. Diagraph Rebirth, 3 colorless, black-green, sorcery. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature that died this turn. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's nice. Flashback of 7, 5 colorless, black-green. I mean, this card's just interesting. It's not great, it's not bad, it's actually useful. If you like playing recursion type decks, this is probably going to fit in there. If you just want to have just a versatile card that maybe you have something where you can sacrifice a couple creatures, get a cool effect, get something big out of your yard. I mean, we played a few different Reanimator type lists on the channel here recently, so this could fit into some of those. But I don't think it's a hugely impactful like format warping card. I'm not gonna, it's either, but it is one your deck's probably, I won't say built around, but has to be able to use that mechanic effectively, or else you're probably not even going to consider the card. So the decks that want it are probably really going to like it, but I don't know how many decks that's going to be. Flesh Taker. First off, when I just looked at this card a second ago, my thought was 1, the name is creepy, 2, the art is creepy. Like, this might go down as like one of the creepiest cards that they've done in Magic, fitting for Innistrad. Actually, hell, the fact that I just realized it's a human assassin means this is actually a human, probably wearing a cow's head. Like, this card's kind of effed up. Like, anyway, Flesh Taker. It's a white and a black 2/2 creature human assassin. Whenever you sacrifice another creature, you gain 1 life and scry 1. When colorless, you can sacrifice another creature. Flesh Taker gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So it's its own sacrifice engine, so you make this thing bigger. You do gain life whenever you sacrifice a creature. Maybe this goes into one of those life gain decks where you're trying to put counters on things. Maybe it goes into some type of something with pest tokens, could actually be pretty neat. But yeah, I don't know. This card, again, this is the type of card that I feel like in a handful of decks, this card can probably be very useful and might even be great on some levels. But for a lot of other decks, if you're playing any type of, I don't know, Orzhov aggro or something splashing white or black that's an aggressive deck, you probably don't really want this card. There's probably just going to be better options. It's an uncommon, which means it's probably going to be pretty impactful in a few drafts. But yeah, interesting, cool, thematic, all that. It checks all those boxes. As far as constructed playable, probably not too high, except for in a handful of decks. All right, now we're getting into the couple of cards that were released today. So we have a Ghoulcaller's Harvest, black-green sorcery, creature, create X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens with Decayed, where X is half the number of creature cards in your graveyard rounded up. Flashback, 3 colorless, black-green. This is interesting to me, right? Because say your opponent, I don't know, let's say Blood on the Snow last turn. That's kind of interesting, right? Because now you've got some number of creatures in your graveyard. You play this. Maybe those plus other creatures that have died along the way. You get like, let's say, I don't know, probably 4 tokens. So you have 4 2/2s with Decayed, but then that just means when they do get to attack the next turn, they're going to die. But you get to do it again because of the flashback. So I don't know. This is kind of all over the place. I like it if I have something that needs some sacrificial fodder. It fits in those type of decks. Maybe something with that flesh cow thing we just saw. Like maybe it goes in that type of deck and this is all just feeding each other. But I don't know. It's neat. The artwork's pretty. I like the card. I just don't really know what to do with it. I am not necessarily sold on the whole Decayed thing for my tokens. I might just want something else that's a better token generator. All right, this one we have is Dawnheart Wardens, 1 colorless, green-white, creature, human, warlock. So a few warlocks in this set. Vigilance, 3/3. So 3 mana, 3/3 with Vigilance, reasonable. It has Coven at the beginning of combat on your turn. If you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So this is just solid. If you're playing a Coven type deck and something that could make all the different powers and toughness, this is actually okay. Bumping all your creatures for +1 and you have a thing that's Vigilance is kind of nice. It's kind of medium by itself, which is the only thing. So I'd have to see the rest of the set still at this point, and the other cards we might fit into this type of deck to see if this is even that impactful. Because getting the +1 is nice, but ultimately, if it's only going to trigger every so often, just having it on a 3/3 body with Vigilance and no other real abilities isn't that great, because we do have some other cards that can already fill that slot. And then our last card for the day, which, looking at it, I'm kind of surprised. Like, immediately I see that it's a legendary angel. I'm like, why is this not a mythic? But Lisa, Forgotten Archangel. How do we have Lisa come up before in another card? Maybe not. I feel like it was at least referenced. Let me know down in the comments. I'm terrible about Vortho stuff. But Lisa, Forgotten Archangel, 2 colorless, white, black, legendary creature, angel, flying, lifelink, 4/5. Okay, so just before I read the ability, we got a 4/5 creature, flying, lifelink for 5 mana, but it needs 2 different colors. All right, cool. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, return that card to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. If a creature an opponent controls dies, exile it instead. I like this card. Like, my first thought was like, but immediately I switched over and thought about all the different Angels decks we played, the different Orzhov aggro decks we played. This is good. I mean, a 4/5 body with lifelink and flying is pretty solid all on its own, but being able to keep your creatures from ever really dying is big. It keeps your opponent from ever utilizing their graveyard because all their stuff just gets exiled. There's not much to complain about here. Like, even if your opponent were to do something like Blood on the Snow, and you have, let's say, 3 other creatures out, well, those would all trigger and just go back to your hand, while this just goes to the graveyard. So, yeah, you just get to reload the board the next turn. And this is pretty nice, even in the Angels, Clerics type decks, right? You get to keep getting stuff back, and yeah, I'm into it. I think it's a pretty good card. I'm actually glad we ended on this one. This is a good note to finish on. So yeah, that's it. This was kind of a short one today. Not many cards over the last 2 days. I think there's going to be another big round on Monday, so we'll definitely be doing another follow-up video and just continue on until we get the majority of the set released, because that's what always happens. But yeah, as always, let me know which of these that you liked today, or what kind of things you're still expecting to see that we haven't seen yet. And also, remember, if you haven't, I have links in the description for all types of stuff. If you're shopping with Ultra Burrow, TCGPlayer, or Amazon, click one of those URLs before you do your shopping, and you don't have to do anything else, and you'll be helping the channel out because we'll get a small kickback. Also, there's links to my Discord, my Twitch, and Facebook gaming streams if you want to come by and hang out. Or if you just want to talk about these new cards, hop over into the Discord. There's a lot of discussion going on over there. And finally, please, if you haven't, please consider hitting that subscribe button, or wherever you're watching this, subscribe, support, all the wonderful things. But most importantly, if you can be so kind, please share it with your friends and gaming communities who may be interested, because that's what really helps your creator channels grow. And that's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.